Today on the Silicon Springbok podcast, I have Paul Slade from Battlefield Partners. Man, that's a cool company name. He is a really interesting entrepreneur who's taken so many of the challenges that he's had over time, failures and successes, and built this really interesting company that he runs today. My name is Don Pitot. I'm the founder of Joyforge Labs, and the Silicon Springbok podcast is about telling the stories of South African entrepreneurs who've built great things, not despite the challenges of South Africa, but because of them. This is Paul Slade's story. How's it, Paul? So good to catch up with you again. Thank you for joining us on the Silicon Springbok podcast. So for those who don't know, I've recently met Paul. He's the CEO and founder of a business called Battlefield Partners. And today we're going to go through his story. And something that struck me, you told me about, Paul, it's your fault, that you have a bunch of penises in your garage. How did you come to have these, whatever they are, silicone penises sitting there in your garage?
Silicone penises, Dom. You have to say silicone penises. I don't just have a bunch of penises. And I'm not sure what the collective noun is for a whole lot of penises, and I don't actually really want to know. But that is true. It's no longer in the garage. There was a point in time where we were working on a project for a customer out of North Carolina, and they had a very specific requirement. And what they needed was this wearable prosthesis that would actually take a Foley catheter. And the reason for that is they wanted to be able to teach people in a prolonged field care environment how to put a catheter in, and then how to measure the fluid outputs and really trend and track that over a period of time, which is a very important skill for a combat medic, for any medic in that regard.
So tell me a little bit why that's important. Why is it important to have these prosthetics for people to train on? So that's not the only thing that you guys do. Just tell us a little bit about what is the business doing now? What does it make, and why is that valuable for the market?
Awesome. So we really think about pre-hospital setting and in particular trauma environments. So that could be anything from a civilian environment, like dealing with car accidents and the day-to-day that EMTs would typically face on their rounds, all the way through to folks on the battlefield and seeing what's happening out there in the Ukraine. Obviously, it's absolutely terrible, but learning those lessons, what we see very specifically is that the medics or the people who are on the ground who are trying to deliver the required care to that particular casualty at the moment of impact generally have to have the right skill set in order to ensure survival, and at least to reduce the long-term morbidities that go with those kind of injuries. And more and more through our experience and my personal experience, which I'm sure we'll touch on a bit later on, I just saw that it's the training scars in the classroom and in the simulations that translate into failure on the battlefield. And so the goal was to try and make these devices that would ultimately be very, very accurate, ensure that all the anatomical components that need to be there are there, like the penis that we just spoke about. But in line with everything else, we want to make sure that it really is very, very accurate. So once the guys have gone through a simulation and they've trained on these products, in the end, they're going to be much more successful in the care that they need to deliver at the worst possible time for somebody else. So it's about increasing efficiency and effectiveness for those individuals. And so we make anything in that space that makes sense, that can move the needle and ensure that these guys are more capable in their arena.
That's awesome. So, but why is this hard? Like, why can't just anybody make these things? What's the challenge that you've had to solve to be competitive in this?
Well, I mean, if you think about going through high school and your guidance counselor chatting to you about what you might think of as your future career, I'm pretty sure that building wound prosthetics doesn't come up as a high on the list for kids to be discussed in a classroom scenario. So you start to question, well, how do people get into this arena? What are the skill sets that you need to combine to actually make this happen? And if I look at the kind of people that I have working with me in our team, as well as my personal skill sets, this is nothing you could have set out and said, we need to train someone on these 5 things and get them to this point. These are a combination of insane and crazy experiences over a long period of time that ultimately combine to give you the skill set that you need to create these devices. And so for me, I started off building rowing boats. And way back in the day, learning about how composites work and how oven cures work around epoxies, etc. I mean, when I started getting out of that space, I thought I'd never use that skill set ever again. And yet now we're using it every single day to design our molds, to design the carbon fiber body armor that the guys wear when they're acting as casualties, so they don't get spiked with a needle or stabbed with a scalpel incorrectly. And so you find yourself in a situation where you've got to combine very, very unique skill sets together to create these devices. And never mind trying to figure out what the market is and what the product market fit looks like and how the device needs to function. You've got such a challenge identifying who these people are that need to join your team, figuring out what their skill sets truly are, and then combining them in this unique way to achieve a successful outcome. So I think it's by far the hardest business I've had to construct when it comes to building a team, because it's just not defined and there's no existing models that I can go and draw on, or any kind of chat GPT answers that I can get to tell me what kind of a team structure I need to define. And so I think it's probably the hardest part of this entire process for me.
Let's say, technically speaking, building the products, you had the experience from one of your first businesses, which was developing rowing boats. And I assume there was a lot of resins and carbon fiber and those sort of things. I've been fortunate enough to row in an 8 many years ago, my youth. And those are incredible machines. So tell us a little about that. I understand was your first business, your first real foray into business. Yeah. Why did you start that? How did you get into that? And what happened along the way?
Yeah, passion. It's the worst reason to start a business. So that's what kickstarted my career there. I'd rowed at school and I absolutely loved it. And to be frank, I was terrible. So I wasn't like a great oarsman that was transitioning into this kind of arena. I just wasn't a great rower, but I did well in my sort of lower categories. But the one thing that I loved so much was seeing a brand new boat get launched. And I'm sure you would have had the same experience when you guys received your brand new 8 and you looked at what this sort of composite looked like and all the money had been laid out and the parents did a whole naming ceremony, but you saw this incredible craft that was about to go and take to the water for the first time. I thought that was the most magical thing ever. And so I was enamored with this process. And ultimately my folks, I don't know why, but they ended up buying me a boat. And I looked after that thing to the nth degree. So much so that years later, when the guy who'd built the boat saw it again, he couldn't believe it was in such good condition and said, "Do you want to come work with me in the holidays?" And for me, that was like a dream come true. So I ended up spending holidays working for him, obviously for free, and spent every single hour sanding boats. Like you would sand from one end of the 8 to the other, which was almost like 16 meters. And then they would varnish it and then you'd start sanding again the next day. So your job every day was just to sand. And yet I absolutely loved it. So by the time I went out and crafted the Slade rowing business, which was my first real business on my own, I thought I was going to design and develop this racing single that was going to transform the entire world. And I wasn't going to have any shortage of customers. My main problem was going to be, how do I make enough boats every single month? And I thought this was going to be the coolest business, the most exciting thing ever. And that was the start of every single mistake I possibly could have made in order to build a business. And looking back, I mean, my dad even said to me, how you survived that, I don't even know. And I still don't know. And if you read my story on LinkedIn, you'll see all of the terrible, terrible mistakes that I made. And I'm happy to share any of those for benefit of the audience.
The one that struck me from that story is, just to set the scene, I think it's in Boston or somewhere. You're somewhere in the US at a race and you're now showing your boat. The kind of realization I think that you went through there. But a little bit leading up to that, I'm sure heartbreaking or backbreaking work, and then that heartbreaking moments. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, that was a pivotal moment for us, and for me on a personal note, that was very important. In retrospect, at the time, I thought it was the end of my life, but what had happened is we'd sort of taken a final stab, and I'd said, I'm going to take these 2 incredible boats that look like nothing else that anyone's built in the world, and with all of the available money that we can muster, we're going to send these boats to Boston. And the reason for that is the largest head race in the world is out of Boston. And a head race is like a time trial that they run down the river. Very, very popular. I mean, the crowds at this thing, you've never seen. No SA Champs that we've ever had looks anything like this. It's just many people deep cheering all the way down the river, past Harvard Boathouse, past all of the most incredible kind of university settings you could ever imagine and have seen on every movie. And so for me, this was the last hurrah. I was going to put these boats out there, and I was pretty convinced that when people saw it, they were going to say, I'm in. I'm buying one. And so I get there with the help of some other friends who had put me up to stay in their basement and literally sort of locked me in the dungeon. But I was happy. I had a couch. I was good to go. And I get to the saddle area where we're going to be setting up our boats. And I'd rowed the boat down from the boathouse to get it to this location and took it out of the water, took my big blue jacket from K-Way, put it on, and I went and put on to trestles in the stand that was allocated to us. And it took me about 5 minutes to look around because I was so fixated on the boat and which way I was going to put this thing out. And I looked around and I just realized every big boat builder from all over the world is basically next to me. And their stands have everything on it. They have flags, they have banners, they have people, they have branded gear, they have anything you can possibly imagine. They have it ready to roll. And here's me, a man and his boat, like standing there with nothing else, hoping that somebody will come and choose my product over the flash that's happening next door. And it was a stark realization for me to go, I haven't played this game well. I mean, never mind failing at marketing. I just haven't even started the journey here to success. This is abject failure. And standing under this sort of beautiful fall trees. I mean, you can imagine this forlorn entrepreneur who had this desire to build this incredible boat and had this like crazy fuel of passion, standing there and actually coming to the realization that this is dead. It was really, really, really tough. But I'll never forget that moment, and I wouldn't give it up for the world because I think about it often. And I mean, it's over 23 years ago, and I think about that as just the other day, and I'll never forget that feeling. So often when we're suffering something similar, because it happens over and over, I mean, history definitely repeats itself to some degree, even if you've had the lessons, they sometimes creep back. And I find myself going, I've been here before. I know what this feels like. And maybe sometimes just catch myself just before that, and I'm able to go, let's make some adjustments before we end up in that exact same scenario. But that was a tough moment to realize that that's the case. By the way, those boats are still in Boston somewhere. Like no one ever bought them. They ended up staying at the community rowing club, and I believe they get rowed on occasion.
But so your boats had done well, like performance, they were good, technically competent, strong. And so I think, with all the enthusiasm that gets pumped into being an entrepreneur, it seems reasonable to have gone and done that. Like, and let's put it this way also, you didn't take shortcuts in the sense of you worked incredibly long hours. You got as much money as you could into it. You built a great product. And then you're like, okay, let me go put it there in the world's most competitive spot. And, maybe serendipity will win and somebody will pass and buy my boat, and that'll be the beginning and the end of the fairy tale story, which is I think what we want to happen often as entrepreneurs. We want to win quickly. But there is that realization that like it was you got smacked. It's like stepping into the ring with the Dricus du Plessis. Even if you've been training hard for 6 months, dude, he's been training for 20 years and you're not going to win. But at the same time, you lost, but you walked away with huge amounts of experience. But you did have to give up, right? You did stop. So what was that? How did that decision come about? And then what made you carry on with other things?
I still went back, and even though I knew it was over, but calling it quits is something I've struggled to do on multiple occasions. I mean, look at some of my other companies. Techfolio was a good example of that. Called it quits too late on that. But the boat business was the same. You kind of wrap up the factory because there's no money to afford rent anymore. You move it back to the garage. So you go back to where it all began. And then it just goes into the slow decline of you not knowing really what to do every day and kind of like trying to fill the time. And at some point you go, oh, okay, no, that is dead. And you finally start to wrap that up with your accountant and close the company. And that's like the final burial of the whole thing. But I think in all of that, the lesson I've kept with myself all of these more recent years is if it's coming to an end, don't wait too long to make that decision. Not that like you must take the easy out and quit, because it obviously is sometimes the easy out. And as you know, the entrepreneurial journey is so difficult that if you were just going to quit whenever it seemed like it was the right time, you would never, ever make it regardless. So you need a bit of crazy optimism. But when you've made the decision to end it, you need to move swiftly and get that thing closed, and realize that those scars will live with you for a very long time. In fact, probably never go away.
Do you remember the day?
I do. Yeah, it's a Wednesday morning, and we closed up our orange trailer, and that was it. It was the done deal. And by the way, the next day was like absolute relief. I woke up, I ate cereal, I watched cartoons like a kid, and I was like, took a breath. It was relief from that point of view.
I think the burden also comes from you've made so many promises to other people. I don't know if you were married at the time.
Yep.
I was when I had my first business, and just even to your wife or to other special important people who've put money in the business. When you give up, you've let down other people. I think that's the hardest thing. And of course yourself, you've put in so much of your time and energy. Your friends are working for nice companies and getting promotions and have moved on and buying houses, and there you are. I had to give up. I also remember the day I phoned my mother crying, like, it's over. I have to stop. I have to stop myself from carrying on because it's just not good. It's not good anymore. And I need to find something else.
Yeah.
Heartbreak.
Dom, it sometimes makes you a liar. It makes you look like and feel like a liar. So you've told everyone how great this thing's going to be. You've told them how you're going to change the world. You've told them how you're going to, in this case, win Olympic medals and change world records. And then you have to go back and really admit that that's not the case. And so you have that feeling that you're going to be a liar. The strange thing is, no one else seems to care as much. They're like, that thing was dead 2 years ago. Why are you still doing that? I thought you gave that up already. And everyone else seems to not see that it's such a big deal. And then I found myself trying to convince people that actually it was a big deal. And they were like, sure, no, carry on. It makes sense. What are you going to do next?
Absolutely. So you have that realization, that relief, and then you go back and get a corporate job because, entrepreneurship just isn't for you. Or the bug is bitten, and now you're stuck, and now you're like, okay, how do I do more of this, but not give up too much of my freedom, or not, how do I figure out the next thing? How did that look like from that point on?
So I decided I'm not going to work again for a living. That's ridiculous. I mean, why work so hard in a factory and suffer so hard and have heart palpitations and panic attacks? I don't even know what that really was while sleeping in your factory. And I ended up at a braai with, so it was my girlfriend at the time, now my wife. She had gotten together with her varsity friends. And so go to this braai. I didn't really want to go. And we get there, and one of her friends has a new boyfriend. And so he seems like a good guy. So we start chatting, and he's like, what do you do? And I was like, nothing. Funny that. And I tell him the story. And he's a software developer. And he goes, so what do you do now? And I go, man, I don't ever want to work again. If I could just take like 8 rand off every single golf booking in South Africa, I'd probably make a couple of million rand, and I would never have to work ever again. I could play golf every day. And he goes, I think I could build that. And that started a business called BMO Software. And the acronym was Buy Me Out. We were going to integrate with every golf club that existed. And we were going to be able to dynamically book, star 120 star, book for golf, and have this ability to book on your phone. And then we realized that golf clubs don't have systems to integrate with. They have pieces of paper. So we're like, that's pretty weird. We should probably build a golf booking system that actually has a club management system. And we started doing that. And as we had kickstarted that process, an old connection of my business partner, a guy named Dylan, he had said, like, we have this requirement with Microsoft and one of our potential customers, but there's a mobile aspect to this, and it seems like you guys are doing some mobile stuff. Why don't you come to Microsoft and show them what you're doing? And I mean, for me, this was completely foreign because Microsoft, I mean, this is the big leagues. I suited up. I got my Edgar's D66 like shirt out. I got squared away. We put on ties, and off we went to Microsoft. And we sat opposite a guy that was wearing a t-shirt and completely relaxed. And in this meeting, we integrated our mobile application with a brand new CRM system that they were just about to launch, CRM version 3. And we showed them this. And this guy basically backflipped off his chair. He thought it was so cool, which in my head was Microsoft love it so much they're probably going to buy us. What I didn't realize is that this guy was looking for somebody to fill a session at the Microsoft Tech Ed and had just found his answer to his question, which was an interesting and exciting solution that was going to be mobile. And so he put us up in Sun City as part of the Microsoft Technical Conference, which was 2 weeks after we had met these folks. I mean, I was still scratching orange paint from my nail from one of the last boats that I had built when I was standing on stage at Microsoft Tech Ed. And we had this packed room and we presented mobile connected to their CRM system. And after that presentation, it went really well. We had a lot of fun. People came up to us and they said, we love the presentation. We love the mobile aspect, but the CRM thing, we don't have that. So can you implement it for us? And before we could say, no, I don't even know what CRM is really, the Microsoft team jumped in and said, yes, they can. And they made us a CRM partner. And so that business was acquired by Dimension Data in one of their divisions called 315. So that was my first real sort of success. And then I went to the corporate job and I worked for Microsoft. And so that was really transformative for me, because when you flash forward to the CRM team, many years later, that's sort of like 6 years after I'd left Microsoft, I'd taken this model of what a Microsoft Dynamics CRM business should look like, which I'd been building, and I kept copious notes. I still keep notes. Every time I do any of these kind of maneuvers, I keep them in Evernote. And I built this model that we applied when we built a company called the CRM team. And that was the most interesting and accelerated journey I'd ever been on, because we just executed the model, and it was very easy in the beginning because of that, because obviously all this experience, this gut feel that's been built up, not just from the CRM industry, but from all these failures and these mistakes and this constant sort of struggle that you've gone through as an entrepreneur, and this forced MBA that you've basically had as a result of all of these challenges, was so easy to implement in the first couple of years of the business. And we hit our 5-year projection in 2 years. So it was like we couldn't stop winning, which is a disease, because you get this disease of victory that everything you touch, you're like, yeah, we won that. Yeah, we smashed those guys. But you don't have any legacy. You don't have any old customers with systems that you're trying to maintain, and, people and the challenges that you had of developing them in their careers. And so the next journey of painful lessons began. And there's plenty of those, especially around becoming a better leader. But I mean, if it wasn't for that braai that I went to that I didn't want to go to, and trying to build a golf booking system so that I never had to work ever again, I would never have gotten to work in the CRM industry and changed where I was.
I think an important lesson there, I don't think it was about the tech, but you guys were looking to solve a problem. You'd stumbled across another real problem, which was, okay, if people want to book golf, that's an obvious one. Probably hundreds of people have the same idea, going to be very competitive. But figuring out that golf courses themselves actually don't have a good booking system, that's actually a little niche thing. And spending time understanding the problem is gold. And getting access to problem spaces is probably the hardest thing for entrepreneurs or people who are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. I'd love to be an entrepreneur, but I don't have any ideas. Well, the thing is, you're probably looking for on the tech side, like, I don't know how to do something better than everybody else. But probably what you need to just focus on is, if you're working in a business that does, I don't know, I'm looking at my desk here, makes headphones. There's probably one part of the process of making headphones that just isn't really great. And if you really dig down to it, there's probably 5 steps into that thing. And if you could just do one of those steps better, and you understand why it's difficult, okay, now there's your starting point. I think that's a good transition to your things that you're doing now, because it's really fascinating how you came up with, how am I going to do prosthetics for these trauma situations? It's not something that you, like you say, go to university and can study, or here's the career path that gets you into this.
I've always enjoyed watching the sort of the history and how militaries get structured and these kinds of things. And through a weird series of events, someone had said to me, are you a valuable citizen? Do you really add value to the people around you? And could you really make a difference if something happened? And that led me on this path of going, well, actually, no. I don't have a first aid kit in the car. And if I did, I wouldn't know what to do with it. So I went and did a Stop the Bleed course. Very basic course. It's a 1-day exercise. It is absolutely incredible. Everyone should go and do one, by the way. I'm not just saying that because these companies use our products now, but it's a life skill you should have, and you should have it for your home and for your family and those around you. And so I did this 1-day course. And I was in because I failed. Like I sucked at the simulation at the end of the day and was sweating, and our casualty had bled out and all of his like fake blood was on the floor, and we're doing this debrief and I'm going, this is not good enough. And so I go to the senior instructors and I go, hey, what's the next step here? How do I progress? And they were like, there's no progression for you. You've got to come back to the same course. So I redid the Stop the Bleed course many, many, many times. I just kept coming until eventually these folks were like, okay, we can't get rid of you. Hey, we're going to be doing this tactical trauma life support course coming up. It's a bit advanced and you're a bit of an old dude now. So, in fairness, you probably shouldn't be doing this. And I was in. I was like, what do I have to do? And so next thing you know, here I am doing this TTLS course. As we're going through the course, we are told explicitly, please do not damage the prosthetic wounds that we have because they're very expensive and they come from the United States. And obviously, being low-level idiots like we were, we dragging the casualty around and under stress, and they're shooting at us with these BB guns and airsoft rifles. And so we end up damaging the devices. And they were really unhappy. And these are not the kind of people you want to make upset. And so I said, I think I could fix it. I think there must be a better way. And they laughed. They were like, no, we've all tried. And I was like, that was a Wednesday. We finished that. And by the Saturday, I'd built the first bleeding bicep wound sleeve in my garage, using my composite knowledge. And I took it to the guys and they went, hey, that's amazing. Where did you get this? I was like, no, I made it. And they went, we'll buy 10. And then they went overseas and did some training, and they came back and the guys said, hey, they want to buy 10. And next thing I'm going, I'm not meant to be building a business out of this, but here we are. Yeah, so, amazing. I mean, the desire to go, hey, there must be a better way. I think I can fix this. I think I can solve this problem. And then I made it better in the process.
I do think that the environment that we have makes it more likely that you would have looked at that problem and said, well, maybe I can have a go at it, right? What do you think led to that? Like, why do you, obviously you had some technical skills, but at the end of the day, you were still somebody willing to have a go.
Yeah. I mean, I get you that you're leading that question, and I'm being led because I agree with your premise. And that is, South Africa as an environment breeds incredible people. I think that South Africa has so many problems, but it also has so much right with it. And it's this unique environment that creates the most incredible and capable people, not just entrepreneurs, incredible people. And you see this, folks move overseas. Why are South Africans so good? Why are they so incredible in the companies that they move into? It has to be based on the way we're brought up and the environment that we live in. And I think that if you extrapolate that to small businesses and entrepreneurs, it starts to define the skill set that is actually desperately required. We have to be optimistic in the face of adversity. And let's be clear, we have a lot of adversity back home. So the fact that we have to be optimistic regardless is a fundamental skill set for a great entrepreneur to survive. Because if you're going to be this person that gets pessimistic and upset and has like a woe is me attitude whenever you hit some kind of a blocker, entrepreneurship and small business ownership is not for you. You need to go, well, that wasn't great. That's not looking really, really good. Like, what do I do? Okay, well, maybe never sleep on it. Tomorrow you wake up and you're going, let's go. Now I've got this. And you have another crack at it. So I think South Africa has this ability to create people who are generally like that. I think that there is a downside though. And we've been told that as South Africans, we're not the best of the bunch. We're not leading the pack. And I think that's wrong. And what it does is it builds this innate insecurity into us. And so often we'll go and sit overseas with our counterparts where we should know we're on the same platform as them with the same level of skill at minimum, if not better. And we have this, I don't know why I'm here. I probably shouldn't be here. Look at who I'm standing next to. Look at these incredible companies that are here. Look at the abilities that they have. Look at the budgets that they have to work with. And in reality, maybe that serves a purpose. Maybe that makes us try a bit harder, but also it stops us from having a crack at it at a global stage. And it's a mistake. And I say that I have that as well. I mean, as much as I've seen globally working for Microsoft and working with customers in the UK and supporting their systems from South Africa and seeing how good we are, I still often have that innate insecurity of going, I don't know if they're going to like it.
What do you think that's from? What's driving that? And is that healthy?
No, it is not healthy, Dom. I mean, there's a pro and a con to that. when I send the stuff out, I have this issue that there's something that could have been better. And it's plagued me my whole career because I always have this insanely high standard. It is unattainable for myself and it's unattainable for the people who work for me. And so something I've always have to try and temper is being okay with not always having the ultimate version of what you could have put out. And often I'll make something that's the ultimate. And as I'm looking at it, I'm like, you know what else? There must be a better way to secure this ongoing entrepreneurial problem of, I wonder if there's a better way of actually hooking this thing on. And then immediately I think the one I've made isn't good enough because I could have come up with a better way of hooking this thing together. And so it's manifesting itself in the fear of what do these people do when they get this thing? And do they look at it and go, there needs to be a better way of hooking this thing together. I mean, this is a piece of junk. Why didn't they fix this problem before they sent it to me? And part of it is also probably not wanting to put myself out there really. Like you want to live in this bubble of, yeah, we're going to create this cool thing and these incredible products, but you maybe want to live in that bubble just a little bit longer and not have it popped by somebody going, no, we've got something better, or we've seen someone do something else that's on a different planet and yours is not quite up there. And so I think there's many variables that play into that fear. And most of them are unhealthy. In reality, we know that you have to get the thing out there. Whatever it is you're making, you have to put it out there. And you have to solicit feedback. And you have to accept that feedback graciously with a level of humility that allows you to reflect on, should we change that? Or did I not explain how this thing gets used properly? Or is that feedback valid, but not in this case, and judge it for what it is? And that's hard. And I think maybe that all of that, if you put it in a bucket somewhere, would be in the bucket with failure, because as much as entrepreneurs are told to go and fail fast, and failure sucks. We don't have to deal with that stuff.
If you can love the feedback, but at least be able to live with the rejection that's going to come. It is going to be there. They're going to be like, oh, I don't like this, I don't like that. And my first business, I spent 2 years building the product before I shipped. Huge mistake. Massive mistake.
Fear.
And also complex to the nth degree with so much value in it. Yeah, but it's all underneath the surface and nobody can really experience that value, and probably 90% of it nobody ever asked for. And that's, I think, the hard thing to separate between, I want a quality product that's going to do well and satisfy the client need, but at the same time, I also want to avoid any rejection. So I'm going to overdo it so that maybe everybody will always like what I do. And that's just not a good place to start. You have to start with something that's fairly crap, that you're not terribly proud of, but that's good enough to get you feedback and to get going into the next round. Thank you to you, Paul. You've overcome your challenges, inspiring other entrepreneurs. Really appreciate your time today, and we wish you all the best for the next phase. Cheers.
Thanks, Dom. I'm always going to need it, as every entrepreneur does. Appreciate it. Cool. Thanks for setting this up.
Well, that was awesome. Thanks so much to Paul for that incredible story. I'm really grateful for his time. And I hope all of you have learned something about an entrepreneur's journey and taken that as a model for what you could potentially do. Here's a list of our social media platforms. If you want to reach out and give us some feedback, we really appreciate it. Please also nominate people who you think could be Silicon Springboks, who are people who've built a business and have gone through significant challenges and done something great. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We look forward to seeing you on the next one.